This is Michael Watson, a retired British super middleweight fighter that you've probably never heard of. Fought a total of 30 fights over his career, accomplished 25 wins and also achieved a Commonwealth middleweight title during his active years. And in 1991, Watson would then go on to experience one of the most life-changing punches in his career. A devastating punch that literally shifted the entire course of Watson's future. Unfortunately, Watson was on the receiving end of a destiny-changing uppercut, which might also be recognized as one of the deadliest punches within the history of the sport.
An incredibly difficult moment for you, for Michael, for the sport, for everyone involved. What are your memories of that night?
You know, I don't really know whether I can even still make sense of what happened. You know, him having to go through what he's gone through and to still be here and it's, you know, I can't tell you how sorry. I can't tell you how sorry. That's the only thing I regret in my career, and really, yeah, it's...
Let's move on, Chris. It's all right. It's okay, bro. Let's move on in life. Peace and love. I love you, Chris.
It's now the morning of the 22nd of June 1991, where both Eubank and Watson were scheduled to fight for the vacant WBO super middleweight title. At this current point, Watson had never achieved an official championship title after competing a total 28 fights so far into his 7-year career, and achieved 25 wins, 2 losses and 1 draw, with 21 knockouts by maintaining a respectable knockout percentage of 75%. In his younger days, Michael was often characterized as being a quick learner, and was able to pick up boxing much quicker compared to his peers by achieving a boxing school title at the age of 14. And just a few years later, Mike went on to compete at Nationals under 75, and as promising as his progress was, Watson was seen as hope for the national team to win a medal during the 1984 Olympic Games, but was unfortunately dropped and replaced from the Olympic team. Also bearing in mind, Watson had only lost twice prior to this fight, his first losing to James Cook that went the entire distance of 8 rounds and lost down to decision, and his other loss was to Mike McCallum for the WBA middleweight title and lost by knockout within the 11th round. Despite 2 setbacks at this point, Watson was still ready to take on his next fight in the hope of attaining his first championship title. Now, Christopher Livingston Eubank, commonly known as Chris Eubank Sr., who's also the father of the super middleweight Chris Eubank Jr., who actively has a fighting record of 32 wins, 2 losses and 0 draws, with his most recent fight earlier this February in a victory over Liam Williams. Up until this fight, unlike Watson, Eubank had a perfect boxing record of 27 wins, 0 losses and 0 draws, with 16 total knockouts by achieving a knockout percentage of 59%. During his previous bouts, Eubank was able to obtain his first recognized championship title by defeating Nigel Benn by TKO for the WBO middleweight title, and further continued to defeat another 2 opponents by ultimately defending his championship title. In other words, this would also mean that Watson will be the 3rd contender in pursuit of Eubank's championship belt. In contrast to Mike's upbringing, Chris was born and raised in Jamaica up until the age of 8, and then moved over to the UK. And now by the age of 16, after several years of multiple misdemeanors and bad behavior at school, Chris's father shipped him off to live with his mother in New York in hope for him to behave better. Upon arriving in the US, Chris began to develop his obsession with boxing and began training, and would train nearly every day at the gym while working part-time to pay his way. And the year before making his professional debut at just the age of 18, Chris went on to win the Spanish Golden Gloves tournament in 1984. The story now begins with the fight looming closer, and finally both the matchup between Chris Eubank and Michael Watson was now underway.
He's decided to stay in the corner. That's the first tactic of the evening. There is only one, it's the greatest one-off. He let Bang have a fling, but then again, there's no point in going back to what happened in the past. A different type of opponent. It's a spanched him, doesn't he? Eubank is saying, well, what's he going to do now when he's backing off? You can almost see him. Now remember, the referees their card for each round, so they themselves.
Round 5.
5. Are we up?
His attitude right from the off. A bit dangerous the way he moved in with his head then.
Been saying that Eubank has promised him that this is going to be his best.
Just found it. And there, Eubank complaining to the referee, which is a bad sign.
And it's no use Eubank trying to and interrupt the count. And there it is. And Eubank.
And if you were expecting something to happen, well then you're wrong. Literally nothing happened. The first bout went the entire 12 rounds with not much going on for both fighters. But unluckily for Watson, he missed out on the victory by majority decision, meaning that Eubank successfully defended his WBO title for the 3rd time. And despite losing his 3rd professional fight against Eubank, Mike still believed he would be able to redeem his loss by ultimately taking a chance to defeat Eubank in their rematch fight later that year. Fast forward to September of '91. After many legal agreements, signing multiple contracts, and several press conferences later, the fight was now underway, and unfortunately and unbeknownst for Watson, the result of their rematch fight would emphatically reshape his entire destiny.
Come for Eubank. So now this becomes Watson in this one, and well, Eubank, to be fair, says he. Oh, this.
Like the other fellow lead off, both Mike McCallum and Eubank have been the opposite kind of fighter.
Dominating at the start, but it hasn't been so.
It's crude boxing for Eubank, not what we come to expect.
Now he tried to hide us for a.
After an intensive 10 rounds, both fighters came into the rematch with much more drive and aggression to close out their opponent. And by the 11th, you wouldn't have been able to easily tell who was dominating the fight. But according to the scorecards, Watson was edging in points over Eubank. And then, just then, this would then occur at the end of the 11th round.
I mean, this must demoralise Eubank. He's produced his best work.
He's got plenty of guts, Eubank. He's standing there taking the best. Oh, he's got him down now. That's the first. Now, is he going to give him a mandatory 8 count? I thought he would have that under WBO. I'm surprised at that. He's walked in and he's nailed Watson. Stay down. The trainer's calling out to Watson. Take the 8 count. And put the sensational 11th round.
After knocking Eubank down to the canvas, Eubank beat the stand count and immediately knocked Watson down to the ropes with a crushing uppercut just at the end of the round. And at this point, this very uppercut made everything go downhill from here. Watson then stumbled into his corner looking disgruntled and confused, and was extremely slow from getting up from his corner. And if you were to ask me at this point, the fight should have been stopped just before the bell rang at the end of the round. However, the referee allowed the fight to continue even despite not giving Watson a full stand count. And then Eubank capitalized on the weary challenger and finished off the fight, winning by TKO and successfully defended his title by remaining as the WBO super middleweight champion of the world. With a few moments after declaring the victor of this fight, you could tell something was off. Everyone as well as Eubank noticed something seemed unusual. Without much notice, Watson had immediately collapsed to the floor whilst Eubank was celebrating his victory. His corner stood there not knowing exactly what to do at the situation as Michael was out cold on the canvas. Michael's close family and friends that were in attendance that night, as well as his mother, saw multiple people running into the ring to help Michael. His family as well as his friends at that moment all hoped he would be alright, and unfortunately there were no ringside medical doctors or even a nearby ambulance in the case of an emergency. Watson was then rushed to a nearby hospital to seek immediate treatment, and according to reports, Michael's brain had experienced oxygen starvation for as little as 30 minutes. But it didn't end there. Upon rushing Michael to the nearest hospital, doctors and other medical staff had told him they would be unable to treat him there, and advised Michael to be rushed to a specialist hospital that deals specifically with brain injuries and brain trauma. With Michael fighting for his life, his family had no other option than to go to the other hospital seeking help. It had now been 2 full hours since the fight, and Michael now had finally received medical treatment. Doctors had reported that he had experienced a subdural hematoma, which in simple terms means that Michael experienced internal bleeding, which most likely came from the uppercut he received to the head from Chris Eubank just at the end of the 11th round. Now in critical condition, Mike had now received 2 surgeries the following morning to remove blood clots from his brain, and then another 4 procedures procedures a few days after to reduce the internal pressure of his brain and also to drain excess fluid, meaning he had undergone a total of 6 surgeries to help stop the internal bleeding. And upon completion of all 6 operations, Michael was in a comatose state for a total of 40 days. You heard me correctly. 40 entire days. Not 1, not 2, but 40. Upon regaining consciousness the following month, Michael had found himself not being able to hear, speak, and also move, which effectively rendered him paralyzed. He then spent the next year in intensive care and rehabilitation, and an additional 6 years as a wheelchair user, while he began to slowly recover some movement and also finally regain the ability to hear and speak. The lead consultant and neurosurgeon that operated on Watson mentioned that the initial 8 months after the operation were extremely depressing, seeing little to no progress while still not being able to hear, speak, and even walk, but would eventually and slowly show promising improvement to his speech and motor skills. In the years following the incident, Mike would then continue making remarkable progress in regards to his movement by no longer needing his wheelchair, and also made tremendous progress to his speech. And 8 years after the incident, in September 1999, Watson and his family went on to sue the British Boxing Board of Control, filing for the lack of duty of care and negligence. The BBBC, which at the time was the official governing body, failed to have at least 2 medical doctors ringside as well as having oxygen, and by the following year in 2000, the case was resolved outside of court with a total settlement of £400,000 in compensation to Mike and his family. There's certainly no doubt that the sport of boxing provides multiple benefits with regards to providing many viewers with great entertainment while providing fighters a means to support their own livelihoods. Unfortunately for some kids, a means of getting out of trouble from the streets by channeling their attention and effort towards a sport that teaches essential life principles such as hard work, patience, tenacity, and discipline. Despite the sport having many benefits, it also comes along with many disadvantages, as fighters are left in situations where their mental well-being are tested beyond reasonable measure, and unfortunately for some boxers like Michael Watson, had no other option than to fight not only for their own lives, but for the sake of those who depend on them. Thank you all for tuning into this video. Don't forget to subscribe, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.